Hello, everyone. So you just finished reading a particularly gruesome section of the road where the man and the boy encounter cannibals eating a baby. So I would be remiss if I did not talk a little bit about why Cormac McCarthy features cannibalism so heavily in the road. First, a little bit about the word cannibalize. It's traced back to the 1500s. It's actually attributed to when Christopher Columbus first touched down in the Caribbean. The first definition is one we might not be familiar with. The first definition of cannibalize is to remove serviceable parts from damaged airplanes, for example, for use in the repair of other equipment of the same kind. And then the second definition of cannibalize is one we're probably much more familiar with, and that is to consume human flesh. So I want you to think, as you make your way through this novel, about how the man and the boy cannibalize, and how this act of cannibalism differs from the other acts of cannibalism that we witness in the book, namely the acts of cannibalism that the marauders commit. And then I want you to think about how this contrast between these two acts of cannibalism, the man and the boys versus the marauders, helps reveal one of McCarthy's key themes. So both the man and the boy cannibalize, but not in the disgusting or gruesome sense of the word. Nearly everything left of value in this world gets cannibalized in the road. The man had to cannibalize something to get the cart rolling again when the wheel had gone wonky. And bodies that aren't eaten are cannibalized for their clothing and shoes. So this stands in stark contrast to the marauding cannibals that the man and the boy encounter, who actually do cannibalize other people. So throughout the book, you might recall that the boy is constantly asking his dad, "We're the good guys, right? And they're the bad guys?" And it is clear that the man has impressed upon his son the importance of this distinction when it comes to cannibalism. Good guys cannibalize material goods, while bad guys cannibalize actual people. So McCarthy envisions a post-apocalyptic world in which murder was everywhere upon the land, and the earth would soon be largely populated by men who would eat your children in front of your eyes. What a terrifying quote. And a lot of the imagery in the road is said to have been inspired by a painter named Goya, who depicts some of the most awful acts that humankind could possibly commit, including cannibalism. So I want you to take a close look at this painting. Look at the various aspects of it, from what the men are doing to what's on the ground next to them to what they're holding up. And I want you to give me an answer to this question. Ultimately, what message about human nature is this painting expressing? What are both McCarthy and Goya saying about the nature of humankind? So this is actually another terrifying painting by Goya that inspires some of the imagery in the road, and this one also depicts cannibalism. It's called Satan Devouring His Son. So if society collapses, would people eat their own families? Let's take a look at some of the biggest examples of cannibalism throughout history across many different cultures. And we'll see that maybe cannibalism is a much more likely scenario than we'd like to admit. So the first example of cannibalism in America that I want to talk about is probably the most famous case, which is the Donner Party. Now, cannibalism has occurred in all cultures across all continents, but in America, the most famous example is definitely this Donner Party. So when rescuers discovered the Donner Party's winter campsite, what they found was far more horrifying than merely dead bodies. The corpses littering the snow were missing limbs and internal organs, while a trio of children sat on a log nonchalantly devouring what appeared to be a liver and heart. The dismembered body of their own father lay a few yards away, providing a ghoulish clue to the terrible tragedy that had taken place. So the Donner Party was a wagon train expedition from Illinois to California, and they encountered a disastrous winter in 1846 and 1847. And this led to one of the worst disasters in America's history of expansion westward. It was also perhaps the most dreadful case ever of mass human cannibalism. Of the 87 people in the Donner Party, half of them under the age of 18, a lot of them children, who set out, 41 perished, and almost nobody would have survived if they hadn't broken the most appalling taboo of all, cannibalism. Another example of cannibalism occurred in the 20th century USSR. So the Soviet writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn describes cases of cannibalism in the former Soviet Union. And of the famine in Povolsy in 1921 and 22, he wrote, "That horrible famine was up to cannibalism, up to consuming children by their own parents." So in Russia, in the 1920s, it sounds like cannibalism actually was practiced by parents against their children. Many instances of cannibalism by necessity were recorded during World War II. For example, during the 872-day siege of Leningrad, reports of cannibalism began to appear in the winter of 1941 and 42 after all the birds, rats, and nearby pets were eaten by the survivors. So Leningrad police even had to form a special division to combat cannibalism. So following the Soviet victory at Stalingrad, it was found that some German soldiers in the besieged city who were cut off from supplies had actually resorted to cannibalism. Another well-documented case occurred in Chichijima, Japan in February 1945 when Japanese soldiers killed and consumed 5 American airmen. So in his book Flyboys, A True Story of Courage, James Bradley details several instances of cannibalism in World War II where Allied prisoners were captured by their Japanese opponents. And Bradley actually claims that this included not only ritual cannibalization of the livers of freshly killed prisoners, but also the cannibalization for sustenance of living prisoners over the course of several days. They were amputating limbs only as needed to keep the meat fresh. It's a really dark, dark section of the book. Cannibalism was also proven to have occurred in China during the Great Leap Forward, when rural China was hit hard by drought and famine. Reports of cannibalism during the Cultural Revolution in China have also emerged. So these reports show that cannibalism was practiced for ideological purposes. So during Mao's Cultural Revolution, local officials of the Chinese Communist Party exhorted their comrades to devour class enemies. And this document refers to eating people as an after-dinner snack, barbecuing people's livers, or banqueting on human meat. Cannibalism was reported by the journalist Neil Davis during the Southeast Asian Wars of the 1960s and 70s. Davis reported that Cambodian troops ritually ate portions of their slain enemy, typically the liver. However, he and many refugees also report that cannibalism was practiced non-ritually when there wasn't any food to be found. So this usually occurred when towns and villages were under Khmer Rouge control and food was strictly rationed. So this would lead to widespread starvation. But any civilian that was caught participating in cannibalism would have been immediately executed in this area. In the 1970s, the Ugandan dictator Edie Amin was also reported to practice cannibalism. Amin was the subject of rumors, including a widespread belief that he actually was a cannibal. Apparently, Amin boasted that he kept the decapitated heads of his political enemies in his freezer, although he was also reported to have said that human flesh was generally just too salty for his taste. Many report that he used this disgusting tactic purely to intimidate his enemies and make them scared of him. In March 2001 in Germany, a man named Armin Mewes posted an internet ad asking for a well-built 18 to 30-year-old to be slaughtered and consumed. The ad was answered by Bernd Jürgen Brandes. After killing Brandes and eating parts of his body, Mewes was convicted of manslaughter and later murder. So this guy posted an ad in a paper saying he wanted to eat somebody, and someone actually responded to it. So the Aghoras of northern India consume the flesh of the dead bodies that float in the Ganges, and they do so in pursuit of immortality and supernatural powers. Members of the Agoras drink from human skulls and practice cannibalism in the belief that eating human flesh confers spiritual and physical benefits such as the prevention of aging. And then finally, the last instance of cannibalism that I'll talk about occurred recently. This was in November 14th of 2009. 3 homeless men in Moscow, Russia were arrested for killing and eating the parts of a 25-year-old man. The remaining parts were then sold to a local pie and kebab house. So cannibalism has occurred throughout history across pretty much every major culture, and it usually seems to occur when times get rough. So if you're wondering, could our world reach the level of depravity, the level of cannibalism that occurs in the road? Maybe it already has. All right, Vineyard, have a lovely day.